hit record. And I will turn it over to you, Chair Green.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, welcome to the meeting of the Town School Partnership. Always an exciting and interesting experience for us. Let's start off with approval of the minutes for February 6th, 2024, April 23rd, June 26th, and November 13th, all 2024. Does anyone have any corrections or comments to the minutes?
I'm going to abstain because I don't know, I don't trust my memory of what happened almost a year ago, but I just would highlight that as far as I can tell, the June and November ones don't have attendance records in them either.
Okay. Can you fix that, Charlie?
I will do that. Yeah. So maybe we just vote the two that don't have it, or that do have it. I'm sorry. So
Okay.
I think that's
just to be correct.
Absolutely. Yep. We can correct that. Thank you for raising that, Mariah. So the February 6th and the April 23rd are the ones that do have it, right? And it's the two recent ones that don't.
Right. And you know, none of us can remember back a year, but you know, the point is making sure that to the extent that you remember and are familiar with what we do, that you know they seem to make sense and are not inaccurate. So.
But isn't there some timeline that we're supposed to approve these by law?
Yeah, absolutely, Mariah. And I think that they should have been brought forward sooner. It just is what it is. So.
Okay, with that, unless anyone has any further comments regarding the minutes, and thank you for noticing that, Mariah. I call for approval of February 6th and April 23, 2024 minutes. Who can take roll? Charlie, do you see everyone on the screen?
I can do that. Yep.
Okay.
So they're all here. All voting members are present.
Will you call the roll, Charlie, for the votes?
Sure, I can do that. I'll start with advisory. Dennis Doughty.
Yes.
Harry Friedman.
I have to abstain. I did not participate in either of those meetings.
Sure. Ryan Obrega.
Abstain.
Andy Liu.
I need to abstain as well. Yeah.
And then we'll do Michael Salmon. If you could let us know if you're voting yay or nay on this. Mike is here.
Mike, you were muted when you spoke, so you're still muted.
Give us a
use your hand.
Yeah, give us a one. Hold on. Yes, thank you, Mike. And Chair Green.
Yeah.
Thank you. So motion passes 3 yes, 3 abstentions.
Okay, let's start off with the next item, fiscal year 25 budget updates. Is that going to be Melissa?
So I think that we put that item on the agenda to talk about the status of the current school budget. I would say that for on the town side, the two areas that we're looking at are public safety related, and these are areas that we've been discussing with advisory over the past couple of years, the fire budget, and then just looking at the implementation of the police department collective bargaining. So that's kind of where we are with fiscal 25.
Okay, so I'm sorry, maybe I didn't understand. So are we gonna follow the discussion of fiscal year 25 and 26 into the discussion of the schools?
So
well, no, it's a discussion more broadly of both where we both are, town and schools are in our FY25.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
Can I ask a quick question? Is there any
Sure.
updates on the budget?
I'm sorry, when you say the budget, what do you mean?
I think that's you're talking about
revenues.
FY26, Helen, as opposed to 25, or
Oh,
do you mean
sorry.
20?
Sorry.
They're talking about current year budget. That's what this item is.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. 26 is the next item on the agenda.
So Melissa, what do you have?
So for fiscal 25, we're, continuing to monitor the public safety budgets like we have over the past couple of years. Advisory will remember that we added $300,000 to the fire department to address some of the overtime issues that we were seeing. We are still projecting a deficit for fire, less than we went to the reserve fund for last year, and seeing a slight relief from adding the deputies to the count. Our current projections, Charlie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, around 600,000 for fire, maybe a little bit less. And that's been, an ongoing effort that we've been monitoring around the leave utilization and the current staffing of the department.
Okay. Any questions? No? You want to go to fiscal year 26?
Well, I think
no.
we've been talking internally with the school department about their projected deficit in fiscal 25. I know that the school administration has been talking about that with the school committee, but I don't think that discussion has been talked about with this group. So it would be good to kind of keep everyone informed the current status of the fiscal 25 budget.
Are you asking Susan, or who are you asking to give that update?
A representative from the school department. It would be good to get an update on the current status.
Yeah,
Susan's talking, but she's on mute. Susan, we can't hear you again like earlier. Yeah.
How about, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry about that.
No problem, Susan.
Yeah, so we are experiencing some pressure points in our budget. In particular, salaries are running hot, and in the first quarter report, we had identified about 1.2 million in salaries that were running over what our projection was, or our budget was. That component of our deficit is closing because we have breakage, meaning that we have positions that are open that have gone unfilled. And so as a result of that, we gain money back into our budget because we haven't filled the positions. So that has improved a bit. On the other hand, we have some challenges around grant allocation. And so we have about $1.2 million worth of expenses that were written into grants that are now having to bleed back into the operating budget. And that has nothing to do with the recent activity from Washington. So we have a group together, and then we also have some areas in contracted services that are higher than what was in the budget, along with some out-of-district placement costs that are running higher. So we're actively managing that, and we'll be giving our finance committee a report next week on the status of our budget. So that's where we're at this point.
Okay, any questions? Hello?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mike, I think, yeah, okay.
Sorry, thank you. Susan, you mentioned $2 million in grants, and I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what's going on. Are these grants that were anticipated haven't been received, or grants have been withdrawn, or where's that come from?
So when we develop the budget, it's developed with an all funds approach. And when we went through the budget process, our grants were allocated out. But when at least one of the grants were written, it wasn't written consistent with our spending plan. And as a result of that, it's caused expenses that were previously allocated to that grant to now have to be funded through the operating budget.
Okay. And out of district placements, that was an issue in 24 as well. And that was mostly, we were told, mostly related to transportation as opposed to tuition. But what's going on now with that?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of the intimate details of the OSS, but what I can say is that yeah, out of district placement costs in its totality is running a couple $100,000 higher, as well as settlements are running higher than what we had set aside in our budget. Contracted services for special education are also running over. And so it's, you know, they're services that support the needs of kids, and they're just running higher than what was set aside in the budget. And you'll say, of course, you know, we did increase those lines by globally by about 21%, but as we look at it now, we needed a 29% increase in order to cover the costs that we're seeing right now. Of course, we couldn't see that at the time we put the budget together, but that's kind of how it's playing out right now. So there's things we're doing, of course. We're not just allowing the deficit to accumulate. And so we're looking at other special revenue funds to see how we can leverage those. We're looking at the grant that was written without some of those expenses included in them, ways that we can modify those grants in order to account for the staff that had been historically on that grant. Right now, today, we're putting a soft freeze on, so meaning that we've asked all staff to issue requisitions for anything that's essential from now until the end of the year. And so I'm hoping that, you know, early next week, we'll be able to see non-salary expenses that we can use to offset some of these salary overruns and or some of the special education cost overruns for this year. So
I can appreciate that you won't have your budget report until next week, but can you give us a sense of how far all of this adds up to? I know you've got there must be some salary deficit left from the beginning of your remarks and the grants and out of district placements and so forth. So what does that all add up to, more or less?
That's a great question. So right now we're trying to address about a $3 million challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Dennis, your hands up?
Yes. So I realize there's another agenda item later in this particular meeting, but since you were talking about cost overruns as it related to OSS and some of the questions about costs there, I was curious whether any of the items that have been reported in the press, you know, the allegations of, you know, financial mismanagement and the like, have entered into the discussion around the $3 million for 2025, and whether you have any comments or sort of preliminary information that you can share.
Well, I can't speak to what the specific allegations are related to financial mismanagement. That's a big statement to make, and I'm not aware of the specifics around why that person believes that. What I can say is that many of the issues that I highlighted for you last year that were problematic, we're still having some problems in those areas. The issues of cost overruns with contracted services and many of these other things were things I identified last year. And though we've made some progress in actually most all other departments, we've still continued to struggle in the OSS department with financial management issues, I will say. So I guess that's, if you have a specific question or an interest, I'm happy to speak directly, but I don't have any, what I would consider to be mismanagement issues, but I'm interested very much in having this audit done, because I can say whatever I say at this particular point, and I'm sure that people will view that as being defensive. I know what you're going to find, and I'm looking forward to the auditors clarifying that for everybody. I think we'll all learn a lot, and I think it's long overdue, and I wish it had been done before I arrived.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, since you do mention specific questions, I do have specific questions about Mike mentioned the transportation services in his question, and your answer was that you weren't sure whether where exactly the cost overruns within the OSS department were when you came to advisory back in the summer for the reserve fund transfer. You had told us about a number of changes that had been made within Munis for changing both accounting coding standards and some of the practices around how contracts would be executed. And you also indicated that you'd come back and share all that with us in terms of what the updates had been, and so you could take us through how the process had improved. And as I'm sure you're aware, that hasn't happened yet. And so I could just, ask for that summary right now, but I've been expecting an update on that for quite some time.
Yes, I had reached out to schedule a meeting to see when we could come and give you an update on that. But with town meeting, I think that kind of got delayed a bit. But yeah, so we have had great progress. So position control numbers are in place. One of the reasons why we're seeing this early is because of the internal controls that were put in place. And so position control numbers were implemented back in July at the beginning of the year. And I think that's going quite well. I have a good sense of when positions are being requested. They're signed off by deputies with a funding source associated with it if we're going to add a new position. One of the things that we've run into is that some of the positions that are coming forward to us from OSS don't have a funding source. And so that's kind of been a bit of a challenge. But in general, all other departments have adjusted quite well. The contract process has been implemented. We've had a little bit of a challenge with that, in that the person that was the primary person to prepare those documents on my behalf for my review took ill and ultimately wound up leaving. But there was a period, there's been a long period of time where I have not had an executive assistant, which kind of delayed some of the work on the contracts being issued. But the process was put into place. We had trainings all summer long. We had 4 trainings. All the OSS administration attended those trainings, so they were well aware of what the protocols are. And mostly, by and large, a lot of this is reinstituting procedures that had previously been in place. But I think in general, overall, it's going quite well. It's just this one area that we continue to have difficulties with the implementation of those internal controls. And but overall, I think the changes have been showing great promise. So why can we see earlier? So what do internal controls do? They allow you to detect fraud, misuse of money, and or detect when you're running cost overruns. And so we're able to see this, since November and December, right? So it tells me that these internal controls are benefiting us. Right now, like I said, there's been a number of unanticipated developments, like writing of grants inconsistent with the spending plan that was approved by the school committee. That is not something that could be foreseen. And we've been struggling internally to reconcile that. And so if that's related to mismanagement, I don't know. I don't know how to make the connection between those things. But I can say that the spending plan was developed collaboratively internally, and I don't have a good explanation for why it's played out in this way. But yeah, so I would say that's what I would say, Dennis. I think we're seeing great results from our efforts, but we're not as far along as I had hoped we'd be.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any else seeing hands up? Let me look. Okay, any further discussion? I don't see any hands up. If not, we'll move on. School department audit.
Well, no, we're going to talk about FY26. Sorry, I thought.
I thought that
No, we were on 25 and then we kind of went a little off
blended into
course, but
26.
for fiscal 26, just have 2 items to cover with the group. Obviously, the governor's budget came out. That is the thing that we wait for before the before finalizing the financial plan. So let me just share my screen here. This just shows the difference between the final fiscal 25 cherry sheet, the estimate that we had in the forecast, and the governor's budget and how that plays out. So we were very conservative in the forecast, admittedly so, that we were assuming level funding for most of our state aid accounts. And so obviously we did see the benefit of a 3.1% increase in our Chapter 70 fund, and then overall an increase in unrestricted general government aid, UGA. One of the things that I was worried about were the charges, because our Norfolk County assessment usually, surpasses some of the gains that we see in revenue. And I was very surprised to see that our Norfolk County assessment went down, especially hearing that they had made some changes to the retirement system. I was expecting that to go up. So that was good news on our end. Hopefully the charges will hold through the rest of the budget cycle. And then you can see a small increase in our MBTA assessment, a larger increase in the RMD assessment, smaller increase in libraries. So overall, we're seeing, about 4.3% over the forecast, just under 3% for budget final cherry sheet to the current cherry sheet or iteration. Obviously the governor's budget is the first pass, and we're hopeful that we might see some growth as it goes through the rest of the budget cycle. I believe that the Chapter 70 number is based on $75 per student. I think last year we saw that get to 100. So we're hopeful that there might be some additional growth in that area as well. Any questions about that before I jump into the, I'll just stop sharing. We'll go into the split sheet after that. Bernard, do you want me to call on people, or do you want?
I'm sorry, I missed. Oh, Harry Friedman's hand is up.
Melissa, I'm not sure if this is Chapter 70 or something else. The charter school reimbursements plummeted. What exactly is that and why?
Sure. So I actually called this up in the budget section just so I could read it, because I think we talk about this a lot. So it's part of Mass General laws that the state assesses a municipality or regional school district for the costs associated with pupils attending a charter school. And the way that the assessment works is in year 1, it's 100% of the assessment. In year 2, 60%. And then in year 3, it's 40%. So there's it's on both sides of the ledger. There's a charges side and then a receipts side. So it really is about the number of children that are in charter schools and the level of assessment that the state provides. And then happy to defer to any school department person who has any additional information on those charges.
About how many Brookline students are in charter schools, and where are those charter schools?
So I don't have the numbers behind what the assessments are. I don't know if there's data that the school department has that talks about children that are not currently in their system.
And Harry, I reached out to our enrollment office earlier when I saw that as well. So as soon as I get that information, I'll share it out.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I don't see any members
Mariah
of the,
Mariah has her hand raised. It's just her background is a little
Oh,
harder to
okay.
see.
apologize, Mariah.
That's okay. I think you're going to talk about this on the next slide, Melissa. Are you just going to give the breakdown of what the impact also of the cherry sheet changes? Okay, that's all I
Yep,
wanted to know.
yep.
Thanks.
All right, so given that, let's jump into the nitty gritty and probably the most interesting part of the meeting. So essentially, this is now that we have our final revenue numbers in place, we are showing what that means for the town school split. So you can see property taxes, the growth is 19.5 million. I will say that about 7 million of that growth is directly associated with the increase in the debt exclusion debt service totals. So really, when you're looking at the property tax growth, when you're thinking about it for operating budget, you should have a $12 million number in your head. Local receipts, we really scrubbed our local receipts, and I think that we've pushed them about as far as we feel comfortable with at this point, especially given current year activity. I think that we're still continuing to monitor. There are a couple of accounts that I still am concerned about, but we do feel that this is a way to acknowledge some of the activity that we've seen over the past year, but still trying to be cautious and still trying to provide the year-end surplus that we need to carry into our capital plan. State aid, that just translates to the numbers that you saw on the previous sheet. We are still not certified yet for free cash. We're hoping that that will happen this week. We are currently working with an estimate that we also used in the preliminary CIP. Other available funds are charges that are coming from the enterprise funds and cemetery trust to support the operations and benefits of employees within those funds. The reason why you see a rather large drop is that last year we were able to bring in some money through the overlay to support the capital improvement plan. That's one-time funding to support that plan. So then you see the other areas that kind of come off the top. And so our general budget is unclassified items that are carried, like property insurance and our audit and things like that. Debt service, most of the growth that you're seeing in the debt service budget corresponds to the increase that you're seeing in debt service for the debt exclusions. The reserve fund, there's a formula that grows that by the percentage of revenue. Special appropriations, I'll note that one of the major changes that we made since the forecast came out is that we made the decision to reduce the level of operating funds that support the capital improvement plan. As you recall, the CIP policies were just recently amended to allow for 6.6% of prior year net revenue to support the CIP. Some of that funding was coming from the override. We talked with the board during the forecast about holding a level of funding in the CIP in order for us to reduce that to 6% of prior year net revenue, which was what the previous policy was based on. So that did provide a little bit of relief, both town and school. Non-appropriated are a result of the items that you saw on the cherry sheet, and then made some changes in our benefit line item as well. We basically are still holding our 12% group health assumption, although we have seen GIC announce a range somewhere from 10.5 to 12%. In checking with our health insurance consultant on whether or not we could lower our assumptions, we are still being told to hold at 12%, if not higher. A lot of our employees are in the higher cost plan. As an example, with that 12% assumption, an employee that's in the family plan of our most popular plan, it would be a $29,000 cost to support that plan. So that's really kind of illustrates the impact of just group insurance on this particular budget. Assuming 30 enrollees added for schools and 10, I reduced that down from 15. The other thing that we also did was level fund our contribution to the other post-employment benefit, our OPEB trust. And we did that during COVID, and given the needs that have been illustrated through the course of this budget cycle, we felt it was appropriate to level fund that this year. So what that does essentially is once you have your revenue and your fixed costs, you have a certain amount available for town and school departments, which is $8.4 million. We take that amount and apply the prior year's split town and school to that number. And then we make assessments for shared services. So we have growth in our building department related to utility costs, repair and maintenance costs. There's a small growth for Munis. In IT, we are adding a cybersecurity position that was previously funded on ARPA. And then there's also software growth as well. And then there's a small increase in our general insurance as well. This is year 3 of an override cycle. So the $624,000 adjustment provides the school's portion of the override that doesn't naturally come through the split to the schools. And then we've also been talking about with us privatizing sanitation and increasing fees to support the new contract costs. We are looking to direct the entirety of the new fee increase to support the cost of the program. And then also an assumption of reduced group health headcount related to reduced FTEs, having that also fully borne by the town. So given all of these adjustments, what that essentially translates to is a town allocation of about 98, just shy of $99 million. And then the schools would be 141,760. And then I just put down here the amount that we originally had in the forecast, which was 139 million. So we've been able to bring that number up by just a little over $2 million from what we had originally projected in the forecast. And happy to, I know I talked very quickly about a lot of things, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm going to stop screen share before I do that.
Okay, Harry?
Melissa, you'll have to excuse me. I have new computer glasses and can't actually see anything. But on that chart, the last column called total, wasn't that differential or change from what you...
I should relabel it. It's really the variance. Sorry. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Can you pull it back up just so I can see what Harry's talking about?
Sure.
Thanks. My question's also
yeah, this should be variance, not total.
Okay. Can I ask a question about is it okay, Bernard, if I ask a question now? Okay. Can you just explain the revenue adjustment relating to group health for sanitation? I can understand the sanitation fee because the prior discussion was about how those revenues would go directly to sanitation, but I'm confused about what I would assume is an above the line for health insurance for sanitation, then resulting in a net reduction to school allocation.
Yep. So we discussed with the school administration that as we are going through this budget and are making cost saving measures, that as we reduce FTEs beyond the assumption of enrollment changes, that those savings would be directed to the department that is essentially making those changes. So if the school department had an FTE reduction resulting from a program change, you would take the full benefit of those reduced FTEs. And
okay, so we will also accrue that once we start to do that as well. Okay,
yes.
Got it. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yep.
Okay. I'm calling just on people on the town school partnership. Any other questions from that body of people? Okay. Let's see. We have one hand up off the committee, and I guess before we move into the next item on the agenda, maybe we should take that.
Well, I do think. Okay, I mean, if you want to take additional questions, that's fine. I want to talk about where, based on those projections, where we see our current shortfalls, and talk about that on the school side as well.
Okay. And Andy first, and then Helen, and then Chaz.
Yeah, a fairly quick question, I think. So at last week's school committee meeting, I think Susan had indicated that we were probably looking at 1.5 million more in allocation than we've been expecting as of December 11th. So Melissa, this 2.1 million figure is it's that number. It's not added on top of the 1.5 that we heard about. It's that number, but a bit larger. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think before we didn't have final state aid numbers, and then we also didn't make the decision on the OPEBs, so that's part of the reason why there's a shift.
Got
And
it.
I also further tweaked local receipts. So those are kind of 3 additional changes from the last time I shared our current status with Susan.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, Helen, why don't you ask your question quickly and then we'll go on to Chaz.
Okay, thank you so much for allowing me to ask. I'm interested in the free cash. I had actually asked Melissa for the last, I think 7 to 10 years of free cash numbers. And it's been very interesting to me that they're in the double digits for the last 7 years. And for the last 3 years, it's been over 20 million, including this year in the estimates. And I'm wondering why we can't use the larger numbers that we have, a small portion, to try and help with our deficits on both sides.
Sure. So I think that we've talked about the drivers of free cash, and a lot of the drivers that we've seen over the past few years have been things that have been one-time in nature. So as an example, we have a high interest rate environment that essentially our interest income numbers we're seeing unprecedented numbers for interest income. We don't think that that is something that is going to be consistent. We think that that is something that will change with the changing economic conditions, especially with the change in administration. We could see some changes. So that, a lot of the activity that you do that does help generate free cash is what we view as one-time in nature. Another thing that also generates free cash is level of vacancies. And so as you fill positions, you'll see that will also take up the funding that you previously had that provided free cash. So that's, we have been looking at trends across the state, and we do feel that we are in the norm in terms of what the experience has been in other communities. DOR does try and recommend that communities try and generate somewhere around 5% of prior year operating budgets in free cash, but we also have an additional threshold of trying to meet the CIP requirements in order to have our CIP go above the 6% funding and get to 7.5% funding. So that's part of the reason why our local receipts have been conservative. I will say that given the reduction that we've made to the CIP this year and the push that we are making in local receipts, I am concerned about trying to make that 7.5% happen in fiscal 27. But I think that we're going to continue to monitor the situation as well.
Yeah, I just to add to that, right? In all years except the last 3, we have been bang on the state estimates. And in these 3 years where we've been above where the state's estimate of 3 or state's recommendation of 3 to 5, statewide, the free cash percentage of all the municipalities that report it have been similar to ours. And one big reason for that is ARPA, right? We had this ARPA money. It was delivered to us by the federal government. They just kind of dropped it in our lap in 2 different installments. And then we put it in the bank. And so we had more money, and then we generated interest on that money. And so that's a big portion of why the free cash numbers during the pandemic have been higher because of those ARPA dollars. So I understand when people see the free cash numbers, they think, well, we're above, we can do something on that. But it really is one time in nature. And when we look at some of these things like parking meter receipts, like, traffic tickets and so forth, and even building permits, which has historically been a cash cow, right? The music is stopping. We're not seeing those numbers where they need to be. So it would be I think, mismanagement for us to go after to allocate free cash at this time under the expectation that things will continue as they are, because they won't.
Yeah, as an example on building permits, I looked at where we are year to date on building permits. Our estimate's around $3 million for fiscal 25. Year to date, we are $2 million in collected building permit revenue. Last year at this time, we were already at 3.2. So that's an area in local receipts that has me a little nervous. I think at its high, we brought in $8 million, but we are definitely seeing a change in the activity under that account.
Okay.
Thank you guys
Chaz?
for the explanation.
Okay. Chaz, did you want to add more?
So just to talk a little bit about where we, you see these revenue numbers, and then the question is, where are our expenditures? And at present, on the town side, given those revised numbers in the governor's budget, the implementation of sanitation, we are currently projecting a town side deficit of around $630,000. It's down from 1.3 million in the forecast in December, which is good, but it's still a deficit that we're going to need to close. We had discussion.
Can you repeat that number?
$630,000.
Yeah, sorry.
So that is a deficit that we are going to have to close through reductions. We have endeavored to propose those reductions across departments. Our primary goal, in keeping with the select board's objectives, has been to preserve the functions of town government, including those presented as part of the 2022 override, and also to preserve staffing to avoid layoffs. And so we have successfully done that. We are reducing budgets that were already, in some cases, reduced significantly to pay for the police contract last year. So the town is moving increasingly close to the bone here in terms of what we have available to us to cut without starting to look at more serious measures like reduction in services or layoffs. So I do want to say, and I want to be clear that we view the $630,000 that we know what that includes, but we also know what that doesn't include. And what it doesn't include is the possibility that group health comes in higher than 12%, which is a possibility. It doesn't include the possibility of settling a fire contract, whether that's by reaching an agreement or through arbitration. You may recall that when the police contract was settled through arbitration, it was a bit of a budget buster that year. I would have no reason to think that it wouldn't be similar this time around. And that is something that would come to roost, both in terms of retroactive payments and ongoing payments in FY26. And it doesn't include any, an additional discussion about, where we are in terms of closing the gap in 25, or on the school side of things. So all of that is to say, right now, we're going to be able to move through town meeting in the spring, we hope, again, barring a group health increase or some other unknown, black swan event, on the town side. But I would anticipate either in the fall town meeting or in the spring town meeting needing to make further cuts to this budget. We are going to do our best to avoid that outcome, but I just want to set expectations accordingly, that we can see things coming down the pike, and especially in this political environment. We're preparing for the eventuality that we are going to need to make additional cuts in order to balance the budget.
Any further questions or discussion from the partnership?
And I will just add that we're gonna, the town school split sheet will add to the packet after this meeting.
Great, thanks.
And we give that
Okay,
opportunity on the school side to discuss on their end.
Well, we're in the heat of developing our budget right now, and we'll be presenting an initial budget proposal to the school committee next week. We've been actively discussing what types of strategies we would potentially need to employ in order to get our budget back into balance, but we're not going to be presenting a balanced budget when the budget proposal is submitted to the school committee. We recognize that we have to get that number down to the number that the town has allocated to us, but we aren't going to have that work done because the number is so enormous on our side that it requires a lot of deep thinking about the implications it has for our services and programming for kids. There's no way to make the kind of cuts we need to make and keep all of the services and programming that we have. So more to come on that.
Okay, I guess somewhat related to that, why don't we move on to the next item on our agenda? That is the school department audit. review and possible vote on a recommended school department audit scope of work. I think we also need to talk about a couple other things. Why are we doing the audit? I mean, is it just because of issues within student services, or are we looking at broader issues related to the schools? I think also, who is the audit client? And this is maybe a little more controversial than it should be. I know that the audit committee has proposed that, in effect, that the town school partnership be the client, in that we are the. I mean, it's a strange body, not by bylaw, but we're the only body that really has the staffing from schools and the town, and of course the legislative branch through the advisory committee. So it makes sense that we be involved in preparation of the scope of services of the audit, and be brought in when the audit is ready to make sure that we can oversee the implementation of any recommendations. I think the other thing that is not clear, maybe that's this is also implicit in the first thing I mentioned, is the scope of the audit just OAF and OSS, or is it the public schools of Brookline? And I guess that's not clear to me, or it's not clear that there's agreement on that.
And I would just note to the chair that the chair of the audit committee who brought this item forward for your consideration is here.
Yeah, and is he Charlie? Can you admit Paul Healy?
Charlie's promoted him. Thank you, Charlie.
Okay, so where do we start here?
Bernard, I have my hand up to comment on some of the things you raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's the background. You can't see it. And I don't know. I couldn't figure out how to change any of this in real time. In terms of the wording of the audit, I just would give a little bit of background. First off, the school committee is meeting tomorrow night to we scheduled a special meeting to discuss the wording that was presented at audit by, I believe, Paul Warren, Dennis Dowdy, and Paul Healy. But that's not something that school committee has been in committee yet to be able to discuss as a body. And in terms of the client of the audit, I think personally, I can only speak for myself personally, but my general sense is that just like school committee was partnering with audit, and I think school committee has been open to and enthusiastic to receive additional questions and comments on the statement of work from other partners, that we would be and again, I'm projecting, I don't know what the committee will do, but I think that adding other committees as partners with school committee would be a welcome approach. I think that statutorily school committee has oversight over the schools. And so it makes sense to me that school committee is the client in partnership with audit, with perhaps even the constituent bodies of town school partnership, if not town school partnership itself, given town school partnership is not even in the town bylaws. So it's not even necessarily an entity that has a strong structure, but that could be another way to go about this. But again, for reasons of statutory authority, I feel like it should go to school committee. And in terms of the content of the document, we aren't reviewing it until tomorrow as a body.
I see Paul Healy's hand up, and then Andy Liu. I think Paul was first.
Yeah. Thanks, Bernard. So let me just give a little background on this. So after Lisa O'Connell resigned and alleged that there were problems with the financial management and practices within the school department, I received a call from Mariah asking me to chat with her about how we might respond. And one of the things that we talked about was creating an independent review to dig into the allegations and make recommendations on any changes that were needed to respond to that. So we discussed asking the audit committee, or the audit firm of the town, to do that. Since they were in the process of conducting an audit, we have a relationship with them, and it would seem like that will be a way to respond quickly. We talked with Lincoln about this, and Lincoln talked to the auditors. Mariah went back to the school committee. They decided it made sense to do this. And so the audit partner introduced us to two people from the firm who are not part of the audit and had experience with such reviews at mass schools. And then we decided that actually the review should not come just from the school committee, but should be the school committee and the audit committee. At that point, the CBIZ, our auditor, came back, or our audit firm came back with a proposal that picked up on the scope that was discussed by the school committee. The school committee sent a request for a reserve fund request to the town, and that led Dennis Stelty and Paul Warren to talk to me about whether it would make sense, first of all, to how we want to determine the scope. And we decided that we recommended the scope should respond to the allegations that Lisa O'Connell had made, which were around OSS and OAF, but not necessarily the school more broadly. And so we rewrote the scope to combine the school district's proposal and the audit partner's proposal to sort of reflect that. The audit committee met on Monday and reviewed what we'd done, and in a straw vote, it agreed that, first of all, that it made sense for a broader group than the school committee and the audit committee to review this, that someone should be from the town as well, given the impact on both the town's reputation as well as the school districts. And so that was what led to the recommendation, a straw vote from the audit committee that recommended that the town school partnership be the overseer of this review. And that's where we are today. I'm happy to take any other questions that you have on this.
Let's go to Andy. You may have a question.
Not exactly a question. Just a couple of quick things to add to what Mariah and Paul have said. I think it's not completely clear to me, and maybe not to you, Bernard, either, because I know this is a bit gray. Like, what does it mean to be the client of an audit? Like, we've been talking about who gets reported to, who sort of ultimately oversees it. Whoever, regardless of who that is, I do think the school committee is probably best placed to be in regular contact with the audit firm, and also best placed to, if needed, direct our staff to cooperate. So, there's, I don't know whether the client is always necessarily the body that's kind of in most direct contact with the firm doing the audit.
I mean, I think in government audits, there is a distinction made between the audit client, which may be the body that is being audited, but it may also mean a body that's over that or affiliated with that body, and I guess you'd call the auditee the entity that's being audited, and the audit client, and the audited entity, do have some overlap, but I mean, in terms of setting the terms of the audit, the scope of services, I mean, it's the audit client that really, has to play a key role, and also at the end of the process is going to ensure that that the recommendations are implemented. I mean, in a certain sense, if the school committee is both the client and the audited body, you don't have that sort of oversight that takes in the interest of the town.
I guess I don't think of the school committee here as being the body that's being audited. I mean, it is our, as Mariah pointed out, it is our oversight of the body being audited is our statutory role.
I'm sorry, say that the last sentence again.
So I'm not sure that the school committee is the body being audited here. In fact,
No, it's the
it
school
is our
district.
statutory role to oversee the body that is being audited here, which is the Public Schools of Brookline.
I mean, yeah, the public schools would be the audited body.
Right. We're the school committee that oversees the schools. The school committee is not being audited.
Yeah. don't
Further, I
think
would just add to
Laura
that, the
said
town school partnership is not over school committee, Bernard. You implied there's a hierarchy, but school committee is, there's no body overseeing school committee.
No, it's not overseeing the school committee. It's the only body in town that includes the schools, the town, and the advisory committee. And
I'm just
unless-
clarifying what you said, which was that there's bodies over them. There's not.
Well, okay, then take out the word over. Dennis, I think had his hand up. Pardon me?
I think I was next. Mike, this is Mike.
Mike was next.
Okay, so a couple of things. One thing I will say is I think it's very important to have a third party, an outsider, look at the kinds of things that the school department, the school district seems to be struggling with, which are largely management and control issues. It's not a financial audit. I'm not questioning whether money has been, leaking out the door, or there are unpaid invoices or anything of that nature. But what I think we're all concerned about is what we've heard from Susan, that she's been working very hard to put controls in place. But I mean, this is a quote from something she said, and I don't want to use her words against her, but nonetheless, it's troubling. I don't have an explanation for why it's played out this way. It's just not, this is a multi-year thing that has been growing. And I think it's really important for an outsider to have a look and provide some help. I spent 25 plus years as a consultant, and the reason that people paid me was that I could see things coming in from the outside that they couldn't see internally. And so I strongly endorse the idea that an outside firm has to do this. I think the broader issue of management controls is it's not just OSS. It's let's look at the whole control system, or have someone look at the whole control system, and that's money that we're going to have to spend to get that done. But the broader the look, the more satisfactory, I think, and the more integrated a view that we're going to get. And as far as who the client is, I mean, the client is the town of Brookline, and who is the report going to go to? Initially, I was not very happy with the idea of involving the town school partnership as the group to whom the report went. But if the audit committee is involved, I think it's fine for the report to go to the audit committee plus the town school partnership, so that we can work with the audit committee, which is a overall town body that and has expertise to understand the issues that a report is likely to turn up, and provide some, as a group, provide some balance, because we do have representation from each side of things. So as long as the audit committee is involved as the organization to whom the report should go, that's I think appropriate.
Okay, I think Chaz, you had your hand up. Why don't you go?
No, I'm sorry. I would take folks in order. I'm sorry. Dennis and Susan were before me.
Okay, it's not clear on my screen who's in order. Dennis, then.
Yeah, so I don't want to repeat things that have been said already, and I apologize if I end up doing that. One of the things that I think was left out of Paul Healy's summary of the conversation that happened over the weekend was touched on a little bit by what Michael just said, which had to do with ensuring that the statement of work, in addition to including the addressing the being triggered initially by the concerns that have been raised by Ms. O'Connell's departure and her allegations, but to Mike's point, I think there's been more concern around the management controls, the mechanisms by which those controls are enforced and reported on, and less around the specific financials and whether every dollar can be accounted for. And so that was making sure that the management, the line about, I don't have the statement of work directly in front of me right now, but there was a line in that combined statement of work that referred to deliverables around management practices. And so to that end, I don't think that what Paul said, that the scope of the audit would be limited solely to communications between OSS and OAF. Those controls that are put in place affect all aspects of the school budget, as I understand it, and that was my understanding of the conversations that we were having. I would also like to say that with respect to the quote unquote ownership concerns, there is a political question. Any report that comes from the result of this audit is going to be made public to the members of the community, my constituents, people who were very curious as to what this audit has turned up and what the recommendations that will be made. And I have received comments as a town meeting member from constituents who have essentially said, we can't let the school write a statement of work and then oversee the auditors. And I realize that that's a gross oversimplification of what's actually happening here. But anything that we can do to ensure that the process appears to be managed by a broader, neutral, dispassionate, town-based oversight will go a long ways towards ratcheting down those concerns. And for that reason, that was one of the reasons why in the conversations with the two Pauls, the idea of combining, the school committee, the audit committee, and the advisory committee, which are all represented on the town school partnership, seemed like the least bad of all possible options. Thank you.
Dennis.
So
That was Dennis.
Pardon me?
I think
that
Susan
was
next.
Dennis.
Oh, I'm sorry. Susan.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I'd like to further clarify, since I don't want folks to walk away and think that I have no idea what's happening here. I have a pretty good idea what's happening here. So there's technical measures that we put into place called internal controls this summer. And the issue for me is less about technical as it is about adaptive. So we can put all the controls in place, but if behavior doesn't change, then the issues continue to present themselves. So I think a lot of what we're seeing here is more adaptive. The technical changes have been made and they help us to identify where things are going awry. So from an internal control perspective, I think the control piece is working pretty well. The implementation and the change in behaviors have not fully been realized. So I want to say that what I really like about the group development of a scope of work is the credibility issue that everyone has described here. I think it's important that the community feel confident in the internal controls that are largely the same on the town side as they are on the school side. And I think people need to feel confident that those controls are in place and that the assets in this community are safeguarded. I think the management aspect of it is really where the challenge lies. So by getting this type of a review, I think it will not only help the community, but it will also help PSB staff to better understand the interplay between internal controls, regulations around municipal finance, municipal budgeting, appropriation, all of that, and other regulations that come into play around special education. I can tell you that I have been designing systems in schools for 30+ years, and you can have those work symbiotically. They don't here. And some of this is communication, some of it is adaptive. And I think getting to the bottom of that will be important. The workflows in OSS are different in terms of approval and budgeting than in any other area within the school district. And I believe that that is where we are going to learn the most about how things are approved within the OSS department, and where the decision-making is happening. And that is where I have the least amount of clarity. What I can tell you is that what I see is that there's a distance between the people that are making decisions on IEPs and those that are managing the resources. And so having a better understanding of that will allow us to be able to modify practices here that will allow the adaptive change and the levels of communication you would see normally present in school districts to be so here as well. So I just want to be clear about that. I think this is excellent and helpful both internally for the public schools of Brookline as well as for the community, so that we can move forward and do the good work that needs to take place here to move forward.
Chaz?
Thank you. I just wanted to echo.
Wait, hold on, Mariah.
No, Mariah's first. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, is your
Go
hand
ahead,
still up?
Chaz. It is, but go ahead, Chaz, and I'll go after you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to echo some of what Susan said there, the importance of this work and the, willingness to cast as broad a net as possible. The other thing I'll just add to this is that time is of the essence. I would really encourage us to wherever possible, find consensus on the scope of the scope of work, not haggle over sentences when we get to that point, but, agree that the substance of it is where it needs to be. I do want to say, I think it's important to recognize the concerns raised by both Mariah and Andy about school committee's oversight and authority, which they're absolutely correct about. The school committee has the sole authority over the school department. They control, the town sets the top line budget and the school committee sets everything else. And so that's important to respect. And I think but I hear what Paul Healy has said with regards to and what Mike Salmon has said in regards to the message gaining, gaining support and credence. When I was at the MMA conference on Friday, I sat through a presentation, the subject of which was, quote, why are school budgets so high? It is not solely a Brookline problem, and the problems that we are seeing in terms of increased costs of transportation, special education, and of other things, and of collective bargaining contracts are things that are happening across Massachusetts. There are some systemic issues there. And one of the communities that talked about how they've handled that was Mansfield. And Mansfield has a town school partnership, just like we do, and they made their town school partnership more active and gave the public more confidence that everyone was dedicated to the problem, that this was not a zero-sum game, that it's not town against school or anything like that, that all of us are coming together to try and address this issue. And so I think I think it's possible for the towns, to define our terms, it's possible for the town school partnership, even though it doesn't, it's not a body constituted by the bylaws, to be someone who either holds a contract or holds a contract in conjunction with the school committee. And the purpose of that would just be, I would assume, would just be oversight. But at the end of the day, the town school partnership still can't direct the school committee to implement the results of the audit, can't direct the school committee to do anything. All it can do is to give the public confidence, hey, during the process of this, the auditors came and talked to us too. And there's no hiding the ball. This document is what it means, what it says it is. So it gives the public confidence, but it doesn't gum up the works, because the town school partnership is not in the business of directing the school committee. And in fact, because its constituent parts are different, it can't. School committee has 2 votes on here, and the select board and advisory committee, I don't necessarily think are always in alignment on these issues. So I think when you think about balancing the concerns here, being able to say the auditor talked to the town school partnership during the process. The town school partnership was able to say, yep, we're all in agreement that, you know, the scope is being followed, nothing is being swept under the rug, this is what it is. And to give that confidence to the public that when the results are presented to the school committee, who is also a client, that the school committee can say, yep, we've got, you know, we've had this, we've been in touch with the broader aspects of the town, we have this document, and here's what we plan to do about it. That balances out the optics without implicating control issues. Because I do think it is important to preserve the school committee's independence on these issues. So that's kind of, that's where I see the audit committee's proposal winding up. I would just say that to the community, the time to do this is now. This is, to Mike's point, a town-wide problem. And on the town side of the budget will suffer if the schools are not able to close their deficit. So I don't know how much more clearly to say that. It is our problem too, and we need to help address it however we can, because it's about to come to roost across the budget, and it's not just a town or school problem.
Okay, Mariah, see your hand up.
Thank you. Without being able to predict in the future where exactly this lands, my request would be that to the extent town school partnership is involved, that the committee be run more similarly to the other committees that are its constituent parts. As we experienced earlier today, you know, the part where we don't have meeting minutes until a year after we're having our meeting, the minutes aren't complete. I think that to me, this agenda has felt somewhat disconnected and not managed. And I know every single subcommittee or every single constituent committee is run more tightly. And I think that if town school partnership is to be named as a member or somehow a body of this, it needs to really reflect the excellence that each of these subcommittees brings to the table in terms of showing the type of management and structure and governance that we each do. So that is my request, is that this be just run much more tightly than it's being.
Okay, we hear that. Paul.
So I just wanted to clarify one question that was raised, and then reiterate a point that several other people have made. And the point I wanted to make about the scope was that the document that that Dennis and Paul Warren and I worked on brought in the school committee's scope recommendations or design, as well as CBIZ, the audit firm, and tried to and that included looking at both OSS and OAF, but also at the school budget or the school processes more broadly, with an eye to looking at how they compare to other school districts in terms of best practices. So it was intended to be focused on the problems that have been alleged by Ms. O'Connell, but also to take the opportunity to look a little more expansively at the processes and the management underlying and financial management at the school district. The second point I wanted to make, and by the way, that was voted for in favor for that scope in the audit committee in a straw poll, and there was one abstain. The second point I just wanted to reiterate was around why the town school partnership be involved. The original proposal we'd had was for the school committee and the audit committee to oversee this. And the feeling that Paul and Dennis both represented, which I think everyone on the audit committee agreed with, was that this does involve the town pretty significantly. And so just reiterating the point that several others have made, as a result of that, the audit committee was convinced that if the proposal was that I be included on the town school partnership to represent the audit committee, but that would bring together a broader set of folk than was currently proposed to ensure that the review has full credibility throughout the town with all the citizens in the town as well as people that work here.
Okay, thank you. Michael McSalmon?
Thanks. One thing I think is important to say here is, while this may have the sort of the proximate cause of our wanting to do this may be a matter of, may be related to an employee or former employee making accusations, but when I look at this, that's not the issue. The issue is repeating deficits halfway or a quarter of the way or 2/3 of the way through the year that are found that relate to people apparently not following procedures. And Susan said something very powerful. Susan, you said the problem is adaptive. It's not procedural. And I'll bet that's true, and that some people are just not paying attention or not caring to pay attention about the procedures they're supposed to follow. In the corporate world that some of us come from, I know what would happen to those people. And I'm not suggesting a draconian step, but I am suggesting that people have, if we find that people are not following procedures, something further than just saying, well, you have to follow procedures is the appropriate measure here. So it's really important to focus on that adaptive side as well as on the, to what extent are people following procedures, as well as whether there are proper procedures in place. And hopefully the scope will include that.
Great. Andy?
I mean, I think this is why it's so that one of the ways in which the scope got broadened over the last few days, why I think it's so important, which is to pull in the comparisons with other districts, right? Because this is a problem that every school district somehow has to solve or fail to solve. And I would love to understand better how other districts manage this issue, because special education is different, right? If an IEP gets written, it has to be serviced that day or the next day. And somehow, everybody has to find a way to deal with that. And how are other districts managing it? And does that, how do they do so, like in conformity with procedures that probably in most places are uniform throughout the school department?
Good point.
So what happens next?
Any other discussion? Pardon me?
What happens next? Where do we go from here? We need to finish the scope of work.
We have to finalize the scope of services.
Yep.
Okay, and I think that requires a group of people sitting down and doing it. I mean, we have a number of at least 3 so far as I can tell versions.
Sorry, what are the 3? Just so I'm clear. As far as I know, there was the school committee one from last week that was built upon by audit the other day, that school committee has not had the chance to ratify or edit yet.
So
right, my understanding is that there were 2, right? The one,
yeah, just 2.
Well,
the one that came to the advisory committee. Yeah, but the one from CBIZ is not under consideration anymore, is it?
No, but they ultimately have to agree to it, right? So the last thing we have from CBIZ is the relatively stripped down thing, and then the committee added to it, and then I believe advisory and audit added more to that, and the school committee was going to meet tomorrow to review those additions.
Right. I just meant, and I'm sorry to take over for a second, but we were sent a letter by way of Melissa that came from Susan, which was a request for actual funding authority, and that was the document that came out of as I understand it, was what came out of the school committee last week. That did not contain a reference to the CBIZ proposal. So I'm not sure how the CBIZ proposal is relevant anymore. In some sense,
but it's one of the scopes of services that we either have to, use pieces of it, or not.
Right, and that's
Audit-
what Paul and I
Yeah.
did over the weekend, was to take the thing that came from the school committee, the feedback that all of us had gotten from our constituents, including members of the advisory committee, and the CBIZ document, to try to produce something that, at least to a lay person, looks like it tries to incorporate all of that feedback. Now, maybe we failed at that, but I had assumed that there would be at least some, review of that by this body, if it chose to take an interest.
I don't care. Yeah, how many versions there are. The point is, we have, we're supposed to come up with a scope of services, and it's either what you've already done or something that we revise.
Well,
the question is, who does it? I guess.
Well, can I jump in here?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Please.
Thank you. So I think your question about what happens next, right? So the school committee, to Mariah's point, is meeting tomorrow on this. I think, with the guidance provided here, which I think has been based on the scope of work that's in the packet for this meeting, I think the additional guidance that's been provided here is a structure in which the auditor reports equally to the school committee and the town school partnership. I believe at some point there was a proposal that the chair of the audit committee serve as an ex officio member, as a seventh member of the town school partnership for those purposes. So I think that's an idea that's been floating out there. And the idea that Dennis raised about benchmarking with other communities that Andy seconded. So, adding those or discussing those with the full school committee, so the school committee has buy-in. Whatever the school committee then decides on in terms of a revised scope of work tomorrow night is transmitted to the advisory committee as part of a reserve fund transfer request. The advisory committee takes that up as part of, in what I would hope would be an expedited course, talking through it, mindful that, again, the name of the game here is to get started and to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah, Chaz, we're currently planning to meet on Tuesday night to take up whatever there is.
Can I add on to what Chaz is saying a little bit, Bernard?
Sure.
Okay, so personally, I feel comfortable with the document that was generated by audit yesterday. Or whenever that was. I abstained from the vote because it was a position, but personally, because I'm in a school committee rep on that board, but I do feel comfortable with it, and I feel like tomorrow night I will basically express that opinion to the other members of school committee. I think that what would be helpful is if anybody else here has any other tweaks they want to make to that document, or that they suggest those tweaks, that we get those before tomorrow. Because to Chaz's point, I want to be done with the never-ending wordsmithing of this. I want us to reach a conclusion on that so that school committee can see it tomorrow, and then we essentially proceed with Chaz's plan as basically send the revised one, then advisory can, hopefully we can also get a revised quote from CBIZ in the intervening days. And furthermore, there is a question that was raised by school committee last week and audit committee this week of when school committee sent its original statement of work to CBIZ, CBIZ sent something back that was vaguely similar but not identical, and it wasn't clear whether that was a simple rephrasing of the statement of work or if it actually had significance in terms of a difference of opinion of what their work would be. So we want to be very clear that the statement of work that's going to them, if there is anything that they see that is not the same, or if they don't accept it in its entirety the way it was drafted, why and what that means. So I think we need to get that sorted out before it goes to advisory. So I guess my hope is, right, Andy's nodding, so I hope that, I think we all have a process, and now it's just the speak now or forever hold your peace on this group for any other tweaks to audit committees or the document that was presented at audit committee.
Okay,
on
that's
Monday.
good. So who should those tweaks that you go to?
I think it would be helpful if you all talk about them now, and I'm sorry because I have to hang up in a minute to deal with some family stuff. But if there is a document that can come back to perhaps, and I assume Andy's staying, but if whatever the suggested changes are, someone here can work on those, and then it can get back to school committee for consideration tomorrow. We in our packet included a version of the document that does not, that's the audit document, but we removed all the CBIZ headers and footers because it was very confusing to people, that people have been thinking that that's coming from CBIZ. So we have removed all of those markings in ours so we could update ours with whatever your suggested changes are. But so I'll let you, I'm going to step away at this moment with apologies. This is a great moment and I would love to be here, but I can't stay this long, but hopefully Andy can stay and we'll get the, and maybe Susan and Linus, and we'll get that clarity for our school committee to pick it up tomorrow.
Okay, so
Okay.
why don't you say that
I
the
just offer
tweaks?
that I'm happy to be the repository for any suggested changes if you'd like.
Okay,
Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I have to go.
okay, any other discussion?
So I think the two proposed changes that I've heard were the proposal about benchmarking to other communities. and
That's in the document that we
Oh, I'm
sent
sorry.
already.
Thank you. So that doesn't need to be changed. And then there's just the question of, you know, to whom is the auditor reporting progress? And I guess the answer, if the answer there is the auditor will be updating and reporting progress to both the town school partnership, plus the chair of the audit committee and the school committee, then I guess that just needs to be clear.
Yeah, okay. Oh, by the way, one other thing that was omitted was in the deliverables section. What was deleted is report on management practices and any recommendation for improvements. I thought we discussed that as something that was important.
Isn't that in there, Paul?
Well, maybe I got the wrong version, but the version I got.
That's the last recommendation.
It should be the last sentence of the statement of
Last
work
sentence.
that came from Paul. And if it's not, then something got cut off.
Okay, well, just you know, Paul, check to make sure that's in there.
It's the last point.
Okay, good. Okay, anything else?
And I do think you want to be on record as having a vote on this, so that you're transmitting it to the school committee.
Okay, how do we phrase the vote?
I think you'd phrase it as, you know, a recommended revised scope of work for the proposed audit, as voted on by the town school with suggestions from the town school partnership. You know, a vote to transmit to the school committee a recommended changes to the.
I move that we approve the transmission to the school committee of the recommended revised scope of services, incorporating suggestions that were made at today's meeting.
Sorry, to be clear, what were the suggestions made at today's meeting? I so far haven't heard anything that requires revising the wording that's in the document in our packet.
But
Yes,
Chad,
me neither.
Had enthusiastic agreement mostly with the changes that occurred in the last few days.
Okay, I don't think if there are no changes in the document, it's just a matter, I think it was the only thing that was outstanding was the reporting structure. If that doesn't need to be in the scope of work,
Okay.
then the scope of work stands, but the recommendation of the reporting structure is the one thing that's changed.
It might make sense, Chaz, then to have two votes, one on the statement of work and the other on the reporting structure. I mean,
Okay.
just it'd be easy, you know. One, so I would move that we send to the school committee the report that came from the audit committee with a recommendation from this body, affirmative recommendation from this body.
okay, it's been moved. Any second? I'll second. All in favor? Charlie, do you see everyone?
I can read the roll. Starting again with advisory committee. Dennis Doughty,
Yes, yes.
Harry Friedman,
Yes,
Mariah is absent. Andy,
I'll abstain because I'm on the school committee, but like Mariah, I will argue for this when we meet tomorrow.
great. Thank you. And then Mike Salmon,
Aye.
and Bernard Green, Chair.
Aye.
Thank you. So
Thank
that
you.
passes with
And-
4 yes and 1 absent, 1 abstention.
Right. Okay, Paul, Dennis, the second motion,
The second motion is basically, and I don't know what the language would be for this, but it would basically be a vote on whether it's the sense of this body that the reporting structure be what Chaz outlined, and maybe Chaz can make the sentence structure correct.
Sure. So I think it would be a motion to recommend to the school committee that the auditors report on progress and updates to both the school committee and the town school partnership, including the chair of the audit committee as an ex officio member during the
I'll
progress
second
of
that.
the audit.
okay, good. Whose hand is, oh, that's Chaz, okay. Okay, Charlie, can you help me with the vote?
Absolutely. Dennis Doughty,
Yes.
Harry Friedman,
Yes.
Mariah is absent. Andy Liu,
I'll abstain again, but again, I will support this when we discuss tomorrow.
Mike Salmon,
Aye.
and Chair Green.
Yes.
Passes the same, 4 yes and 2 abstentions, or one absent.
Okay, so that, we finished that. Next item is discussion on revenue and expenditures committee. Chaz, what do we have? What are we doing there?
I just want to update the body. We've had discussions with individual members of all the constituent bodies, and we're approaching putting together a final slate. The chair and the vice chair of the select board, who are charged with putting that together, are in the process of finalizing that slate and asking members. We hope to have that before the select board next week, but we will circle back with the constituent bodies beforehand just to make sure everyone is online and in agreement on that front.
Yeah, John Van Slyke and I last night worked on putting together a preliminary membership list. We do not have acceptance by a couple people, so I don't want to mention what that list is, but it should be ready by the next meeting of the select board. Okay, anything else on that? School building projects update.
Well,
That's
this
usually
is,
Helen, right?
yes, this will be the good news piece of the meeting today. As many of you probably already know, some might not, we have gotten the final GMP from the contractor. The original construction budget was 168 million. The final GMP came in at 164 million without the ad alternates. And included in that number was some added scope from the fire department, from the mitigation efforts over because of Article 97, and a protest by one of the sub-bids for the contractors, the electrical sub-bid. They took the higher number and put that in the 164 million. The school building committee voted to accept the first ad alternate and delay the photovoltaics, resulting in a GMP of 165 million, still substantially underneath the original construction budget. We are looking into photovoltaics with the town sustainability department and Alexandra Vecchio, and we'll be working on the best financial way to look at how to access this, both for this project and for the Driscoll School project. Overall, I'm really pleased with the way the different teams have worked together, the architect, the construction company, the school building committee. This vote, the GMP, will be voted tomorrow by the building commission, hopefully. and then be forwarded to the select board for your meeting on Tuesday. I think will be docketed after tomorrow. And then the school committee would do the final vote on Thursday. This is part of the way we do business in town, that all three bodies need to vote the contract. I'm really excited. I think it's also really important to note that there has been no change orders on the first GMP, which is huge, that we're on budget and on time with that. And I think if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. I think people also know, though, that we are going to be receiving 45 million in reimbursement, hopefully from the Mass School Building Authority for this project. So things are going well.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Last item on the agenda. So with that, I will end the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Actually, can I say one thing
Dennis?
really quickly? That last conversation that we had about, figuring out the terms for the audit. I mean, you commented on it earlier, Helen. That could have been very, very tense. And I just want to thank all the participants who were involved, particularly Andy, Mariah, and Susan. This could be a difficult time, and that turned out not to be a difficult conversation. And I really appreciate the seriousness and attention with which everyone is engaged in what could be a very, very difficult topic.
Right. I agree. Thank you for mentioning that, Dennis. Okay, with that, the meeting is over.